Around 30,000 young airmen who climbed into the B-24 Liberator would never return from their missions. It was the loss of an entire mid-sized town, erased by the bomber's flaws and the perilous operations it was sent into. By the war's end, half of all B-24s were gone, and today we uncover why. Let us begin. To understand the Liberator's tragic legacy, we must return to its origins, to how it became the most produced bomber in history, with a staggering 18,500 units built, and yet why so many who flew it never made it home. In 1939, the U.S. Army Air Corps demanded a new long-range bomber, one with greater reach, speed, and payload than the already legendary B-17 Flying Fortress Consolidated Aircraft took on the challenge, creating the Model 32, soon designated the B-24. Its designers paired highly efficient Davis wings with a deep fuselage and twin tail fins. These wings offered remarkable lift and range, vital for missions deep into enemy territory, far beyond where other bombers could strike. By 1941, testing was complete, production had begun, and as America entered the war, the B-24 evolved rapidly. On paper, it looked formidable, especially with improvements like a powered twin .50 caliber nose turret, upgraded armor, and a 12,000-pound bomb load. But once it flew alongside the proven B-17, its weaknesses emerged. The very features that gave it range and payload would become the same flaws crews knew too well. And for many, the reason they never survived the conflict. The Liberator rolled out of 5 massive plants, including the famed Ford Willow Run factory, where at peak output, one B-24 was completed nearly every hour. It carried 4 engines producing roughly 1,200 horsepower each and required a crew of 10, pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, and 6 gunners, 10 men whose fate rested on the machine around them. They worked in cramped, unforgiving spaces, connected only by a narrow 9-inch catwalk threading through the bomb bay, the sole passage between crew compartments. Later variants carried a standard array of 10.50 caliber guns, 2 in the waist, the rest mounted in powered turrets to give full defensive coverage against enemy fighters. But even this firepower could not shield them from everything. Though the Liberator was faster than the B-17, reaching nearly 300 miles per hour, it flew at a lower operational ceiling, placing it at altitudes where flak became far more accurate and far more lethal. Its combat range, about 2,000 miles, surpassed all other Allied heavy bombers of the time. Yet while it could technically haul 12,000 pounds of bombs, it could only manage that load for roughly 400 miles. On the longer missions for which it was most often used, crews typically carried no more than 5,000 pounds. Its twin bomb bays featured unusual roller shutter doors, which slid into the fuselage rather than opening downward. This reduced drag and allowed the aircraft to maintain its speed during the perilous moments of a bombing run. The Liberator's combat debut came in early 1942, not with the Americans, but with the British Royal Air Force, who had ordered the aircraft before its prototype was even complete. Its first task was long-range patrols over the Atlantic, closing the deadly gap where German U-boats ravaged convoys sailing from America to Britain. No other aircraft could reach that distant stretch of ocean, and the B-24's endurance helped shift momentum in the Battle of the Atlantic. Months later, B-24s began arriving with the U.S. 8th Air Force in England. Until then, American crews had relied mostly on B-17, but soon, 14 B-24 bomb groups were established. Originally, they were expected to fly alongside the Flying Fortresses, yet their mismatched cruising speeds made formation work nearly impossible. The B-24s were eventually placed into their own division. From bases in Britain, North Africa, and later Italy, the Liberators carried the war into Axis-held territory, beginning a chapter marked by both endurance and extraordinary loss. Unlike other Allied bombers, B-24 crews endured devastating losses to enemy fighters and flak. There were even recorded cases of captured Liberators being used by the Germans to approach formations undetected, tricking the Allies into believing they were friendly aircraft. Now, the problems. The flaws that gave the B-24 its grim reputation among the men who flew it. We begin with the most immediate. The Liberator was difficult to handle. To survive enemy interceptors, the greatest threat in daylight bombing, crews had to maintain tight, disciplined formations, overlapping their fields of fire and staying close to friendly escorts. With the B-17, this was manageable. One bomber's wings could sit neatly above or below the next. But the B-24 resisted such precision. Its controls were heavy, its responses demanding pilots were forced to make constant adjustments just to hold position. So exhausting that they often rotated control every 15 minutes. German fighters recognized this weakness instantly and attacked B-24 groups before striking the sturdier B-17's. Then came the issue of survivability. The Liberator simply could not absorb punishment the way the Flying Fortress could. It carried some armor around crew positions, but weight limits meant protection was sparse. Its fuel tanks were only partially self-sealing, making fire a constant fear when hit over enemy territory. And those advanced Davis wings, the very feature that granted the aircraft its speed and range, proved vulnerable in combat. Where a B-17 might limp home with astonishing damage, a B-24's wing could fail entirely after a single flak burst or cannon strike. Its twin rudders and tail were similarly fragile. One well-placed hit could bring the entire aircraft down. Escape was no easier. That narrow 9-inch catwalk, difficult enough in calm flight, became nearly impossible to navigate in a burning, spiraling bomber. The emergency hatches were tight and awkwardly positioned. Many crews never made it out. Water landings were equally perilous. The B-24 performed poorly in ditching, often sinking so rapidly that there was no time for escape. And because Liberators frequently returned from long Pacific missions with significant damage, these emergency landings were far from rare. Mechanical issues added yet another layer of danger. Crews recalled engines suddenly failing or oil erupting without warning. But the darkest chapter for the B-24 and its men was still ahead. Operation Tidal Wave, August 1st, 1943. One of the most critical Allied air assaults of the entire war was underway. The B-24 Liberator was about to prove itself, or be broken, in a mission of staggering difficulty. 178 B-24s, organized into 5 groups, were sent to strike 9 vital oil refineries around Ploiești, Romania. It was one of the largest and most dangerous bombing operations of the war, a high-risk, low-altitude daylight attack shrouded in absolute secrecy. Many crews believed they were heading to Palestine until moments before departure. These refineries supplied Germany with roughly 60% of its oil. Already strained by fuel shortages, the Axis could suffer a crippling strategic blow, perhaps even threaten the war's outcome. If more than half of this production were destroyed, but this was not the Allies' first attempt. In 1942, B-24s had struck Ploiești and inflicted only modest damage. Now the Liberator would be tested again, in a mission from which many would not return. However, the Germans had prepared for another assault. They built a formidable shield of anti-aircraft defenses, situating hundreds of flak guns around the refineries. By this point, Ploiești had become, after Berlin and Vienna, one of the most heavily defended targets in Europe. Yet General Louis Brereton insisted the attack must go forward, declaring that even the loss of 50 bombers would be a small price to pay for success. His plan demanded that the Liberators approach at extremely low altitude, releasing their bombs from just 250 feet to evade radar. When group commanders heard this, they protested, but Brereton refused to reconsider. Ploiești had to be destroyed. The bombers would fly low for 2,400 miles from their bases in Libya, across the Mediterranean, then over Yugoslavia into Romania, each group assigned a specific target. What they did not know was that their mission had already been compromised. 3 German spies, who would not be discovered until 1944, alerted the High Command the moment the Liberators took off. From that instant, the operation was doomed. Still unaware, the formation pressed on. Then a B-24 named Wongo Wongo began flying erratically and crashed into the sea. Shocked, the pilot of another Liberator, a friend of the downed crew, disobeyed orders, broke formation, and circled back in a desperate search for survivors. None were found. Burdened by fuel and bombs, he could not catch up with the group and was forced to return to Africa. 9 more aircraft turned back in the confusion, many unsure whether to continue under strict radio silence. But losing 10 bombers was not the true catastrophe. The aircraft that returned to look for survivors carried the deputy lead navigator for the entire mission. The lead navigator had been aboard Wongo Wongo and had just been lost. The 2 men most qualified to guide this operation were now gone. As the groups crossed Yugoslavia, they plunged into dense cloud cover. Formations began to unravel, and German radar soon detected them. The plan had called for multiple groups to strike Ploiești from unexpected directions, but with navigators improvising, errors mounted. Radio silence finally broke as commanders tried desperately to re-establish order. All 5 groups eventually reached their main checkpoint 60 miles from Ploiești. But from there, chaos took hold. One group turned the wrong way and flew toward Bucharest, straight into concentrated anti-aircraft fire. Romanian and German fighters scrambled to intercept, first searching at 16,000 feet, the Liberator's usual altitude, before realizing the bombers were flying just above the treetops. Now in range of every weapon on the ground, the carnage began. The first B-24 fell, then many more. Under relentless fire, crews broke formation, diving toward their targets while dropping bombs from only 250 feet. Their payloads, 500 and 1,000-pound bombs, some with time fuses, created deadly conditions for the waves behind them. Explosions, smoke, and fire engulfed the sky. Damaged Liberators, leaking fuel, were ignited by blasts from previous bombs. The mission became a series of horrifying moments. One Liberator, Old Baldy, flew so low its gunners fired directly at flak crews. Struck head-on by an 88mm shell, it crashed onto the very gun that had hit it, killing both its 10-man crew and the 6-man flak team beneath. 2 other Liberators, flying at barely 50 feet, encountered a camouflaged flak train. Their gunners opened fire, disabling the locomotive. Another bomber, Jose Carioca, was hit by a Romanian fighter and crashed into the Ploiești women's prison, destroying the building and killing more than 50 people. The survivors turned for home, but their ordeal was far from over. German and Romanian fighters now poured into the sky, swarming the shattered formations. Exhausted gunners fought desperately as Liberators fell one after another, leaving burning wreckage across the countryside. Parachutes were rarely seen. General Brereton had once declared that losing 50 bombers would be acceptable. But by the mission's end, 73 B-24s were gone, and over 500 American airmen were killed or wounded. 55 more bombers limped back with heavy damage, and around 100 crewmen were captured. The mission earned 5 Medals of Honor, 3 posthumously, the most ever awarded for a single air action. Dozens more distinguished Service Crosses and Silver Stars followed. Yet the blow to Germany proved fleeting. Most of the refinery damage was repaired within weeks, and fuel output soon exceeded pre-raid levels. Still, the Allies continued to strike the refineries throughout the war. By 1945, more than 200 bombers had been lost over Ploiești alone. Bomber crews in the Second World War suffered staggering losses, and their missions caused immense destruction on the ground, a reality that grew even more pronounced with the arrival of the B-29 Superfortress and the firebombing campaigns over Japan. Near war's end, however, some B-24s were converted for humanitarian supply drops, delivering food to starving Dutch civilians trapped behind German lines, proof that even a machine built for war could be turned toward mercy. When the conflict finally ended, the B-24 vanished with astonishing speed. Within a single year, almost every Liberator was scrapped, the vast fleet reduced to fragments, while the memories of those who flew them endured far longer.